Great. Okay. So, and it's going to be available on our YouTube channel in a couple of weeks. So keep an eye out for the link, everyone. But yeah, welcome everyone to the first of our winter webinar series from 2022-2023. This is going to be a conversation, as you probably saw, about farm branding. So we're really lucky to have our three speakers, Sam Wilkin of Cellerman. You may know him from his podcast, Cellerman Sam. He's also a filmmaker. And we're also joined by Dougie and Kate from Saltwood Studio, which is a rural design studio based in the UK and the United States, and both have farming backgrounds. I'm going to give everyone about 20 seconds from the speakers to introduce themselves more fully. But I just want to say, I think it's fantastic that we can have people speaking about branding who have a really tangible experience of farming and food production as well. So I think that's really nice. And thank you so much for joining us this evening, you guys. And also, I just want to say, I think the speakers and I are all quite keen that this stay quite informal and casual. So if you could keep your microphones off for the presentation, that'd be great. But it would be great if you could also keep your cameras on so we can see who's in the crowd and it's a bit more personable that way. So what we're going to do is we'll just go around and do about 20 seconds or so of introductions so you can see a bit who we're speaking from or hearing from today. And then we'll go to Dougie and Kate to start talking a bit about what they do at Saltwood Studio in terms of branding. And then we'll hear from Sam and then go to more broader discussion. In the meantime, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat and I'll keep an eye on them. And if they're relevant, if you want clarification on anything, I'll just jump in. But also feel free to put your hands up if you'd like to speak to everyone directly, because it'd be great to hear from you all. So yeah, with that, maybe Dougie, do you want to start with a quick introduction?
Sure. Hi, hello everyone, and thank you all for coming. I'm Dougie. I'm an illustrator, an artist, and sort of draw the pictures at Saltwood Studio, where I work with Kate. I've been farming sort of almost 10 years now post art school, and I split my time between having a small market garden here in North Devon and then the work that we do at Saltwood Studio.
I'm Kate. I'm Kate McLean. I am zooming in from Vermont, and I am Dougie's colleague at Saltwood Studios. I do the writing to his illustrations and drawings and visual work. And I also have been farming here in Vermont. I have a livestock farm with my co-parent and my children and my parents. It's kind of a family farm. And I've been farming since 2011. So it's been a bit of time, and throughout that whole process, trying to find different ways to articulate that experience on social media and through writing.
Thank you so much, Kate. Sam?
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me here. First things first, I am not a farmer, so I'm very impressed that Dougie and Kate managed to do both. My background is as a cheesemonger, so I've worked in London as a cheesemonger for over 12 years now, and in the last 2 years I set up Cellerman to tell the stories of the people that I found most interesting in the industry, which were the people who actually made the cheese, not the customers, not the retailers, the wholesalers, but the people who actually did the work of making these amazing things in the beautiful countryside. So I now spend my time helping those makers either bring their product to market, putting it in front of the right people, but top really is that I help them tell their story. So we try and figure out what that is, and we figure out the best way to do that. So you'll hear more about that from Dougie and Kate, but that's a rough idea of what I do anyway.
Great, thank you so much, Sam. So with that, I'll pass over to Dougie and Kate to talk a bit about your side of things.
Okay, so I'm just trying to figure out how to operate Zoom again. So it's not, I think this will work best if we don't see it so much as a kind of one talk and then we sort of move on. So if you have questions, I think Charlotte's going to keep an eye out in the chat, and if we can try and make it as sort of specific to where you are with what you're doing, the better. I just wanted to kind of offer up a bit of a framework for this conversation. and talk about branding and what that means to at least Kate and I, and Sam, we've talked a little bit about it as well, but branding can mean different things to different people. And we're not a brand consultancy and we don't create brands for people, but we work within that world of, we either work with large brands that have existed for years and we're there to tell a specific story or create a piece of artwork, or we're working with small farms who are thinking, okay, I think we need a brand. And then what is that? So hopefully I can just explain a bit about what that is and then how we sort of suggest where we come in that process. So if we look at a brand and we take a person, and I'm gonna have to pick on someone. Maybe it's Sam. that's what Zoom's shown me. So what is like brand Sam? Well, if you know Sam and you interact with Sam, you have these experiences. And so if you were to get an email from Sam and you're reading it, it would read in a certain way, and you would perhaps hear his voice in the way that he writes. And if you ask Sam a favor, you would sort of have an expectation of how he's likely to respond. And if you were, the way that he presents. So if you had a party, you'd kind of know, you could probably pick Sam out from a crowd based on what he's wearing. It's sort of, you begin through experience to build up an expectation of that person. And it's exactly the same sort of context in a small business or any business, that through the interactions you have with that creates a consistency and that creates trust. So if you were to see Sam's logo on something, even though Sam's not there, all of your experience and your expectation comes when seeing that logo. And that's what a brand is. So that's the sort of distinction between a logo and a brand, that a logo is just a representation of a brand. It's a brand mark, but it's not the brand itself. So I hope that at least explains the framework that I see when I'm sort of creating that. And the way that Kate and I like to work, which helps me, is we write a narrative that explains the sort of intricacies and distills the messaging down to its purest form. And that gives us a little piece of writing, a little story. And if we can communicate that in all of those interactions, whether that's, say, at the farm gate, if that's on the packaging, on the phone, on socials, if we're always telling that story, then it's always a consistent message. And so people can sort of build up an understanding of the brand. So I think that, again, it's tricky talking to like a blank screen, but if you have any questions, just jump in and say. So I'm going to give an example of some work that we did for no less than a Russ Carrington award-winning, is that the right word? Did I say it right, Charlotte? Ish. Okay.
Also, I think Kate has something she'd like to jump in at as well.
Okay. Before that, Kate, because I was about to show a piece of writing that Kate did for the Green Butcher, who is a PFL and organic butcher in Twickenham.
Yes, I just wanted to add on to what you were saying, Dougie, about what we do and what we're trying to help our clients do, and what we're hoping to impart to you guys today is that, and I know I don't have to sell you guys on this, but I think it bears emphasis, which is that we in the farming business, we're up against these gigantic producers that are betting on convenience to sell their wares. And we have to, as small producers, as small farmers, growers, we need to be articulating why it's important to buy from us. We have to be selling ourselves. And the through greenwashing and the farm to table greenwashing and all of that, the the words that we have been relying on for the last 30 or 40 years in this field no longer work on them, on their face. You know, you can't say something is natural, or you can't say it's, you know, there are trouble with labels. And so it's very important from that, the way that Dougie and I think, see it, to tell this story. And what Dougie's about to show us with the Green Butcher is the story distilled into a few slides. And then what we want to talk about is how you use that distillation in all of your communications and all of your branding. And I just wanted to kind of expound on that. So sorry to interrupt you, Dougie.
Oh, not at all. No, that was helpful, because I kind of realized there was things I wanted to say that I completely forgot about. One of those was just to give my own personal example, because actually writing this narrative for yourself and your farm can be really, really difficult. And it's something that I really struggle with, even though, you know, I'm not going to say it's the main reason that I like to produce things is to draw my own logo, but, you know, it's definitely up there. It's really hard. It's a really introspective process, but it doesn't have to be. It's always a good idea when thinking about this is why you are telling the story. And I think that's what, you know, Kate was saying. But if you're, as a business, if you're going to spend the time and the money on packaging, or the next step in, you know, into putting your business out there through a website, whatever, understanding why you're telling that story is really helpful in the actual writing of it, and getting, you know, these are key points that I need to communicate to my customers. And this is going to create an opportunity for my business that can only be solved if people know about this about me. And that could be a chef or a wholesaler or a, you know, a customer buying direct. And to touch on sort of certification marks, because this is a PFL webinar, it's, you know, that can be a really useful tool. So if my carrots get sold in the local shop in the town, then the fact that the wholesaler is selling non-organic carrots and my carrots are organic, great. So some customers, that's enough. It's a sort of a checkbox. But if a customer's had an interaction with me at a market, or has seen my brand somewhere else, then I think you've got to believe in yourself as a small producer that people do want to support you. They want to be along for that ride. And if it can feel like it's coming from you at as many interactions as possible, then it can really be positive for business. So with that, I'm going to try and share a screen. Cool. It's not gone well. Sorry, everyone. He says, we even had a practice. There we go. Okay. And because it's informal, I'm not even going to do full screen. That's how casual this is. So you can jump in whenever, and we're just going to roll through. So this is The Green Butcher by Nick Green. And he came to us when there wasn't really a logo for the brand, but there was an opportunity where he needed to start telling his story on packaging or online, because the business was growing. So then I'm going to read this kind of boring brief. And to go back to branding a person, this is if I was describing Sam. This isn't Sam. This is like, Sam is this tall. He enjoys cheese. He has a beard. Like, this is information that I need to communicate, but this isn't Sam. So hopefully you can see some of this in Kate's work. So this is a very dry business perspective, but we need to create a written narrative, a brand mark, and an identity for the Green Butcher that's going to communicate the position locally within Richmond, as well as their link to the regenerative farm to table sort of chain. The identity should represent the quality of the product, which in a lot of your businesses will go without saying. The product's amazing. We know that. Like, it needs to communicate that, of course, but also the partnership with the farms, and all potential sort of touch points, whether that's online, so that regional people who aren't coming into the store, they can understand the messaging. It should feel approachable, nurturing, honest, demonstrating a motivation to bring the highest quality meat and dairy to customers, and to support, collaborate, and champion the UK's best natural farms and farmers. So that's what we're trying to do. And I'm going to scroll down, and this is a longer piece of writing that we call a brand narrative that I'm hoping Kate can read, because she's better at reading.
He likes my American accent. So this is, we started with what Dougie was just reading, and many, longer conversations with Nick, the client. And then we came up with this, and this brand narrative, I think you can envision this on a website, and I'm going to read it to you, and then we can talk more about how we use that. A lot has changed since the industrialization of food. Ingredients and provenance overtaken by commodities and convenience. The road to the origin of your supper made opaque and congested. Fortunately, the old way is still traveled. A well-trodden, quieter one from farm to city remains open, winding her determined way over meadowed hills and shaded oak valleys, kept open by the friendship of two craftsmen, the farmer and the butcher. At the Green Butcher, our culture is built around this friendship. We nourish it and the families we feed by working directly with the best producers in the country. Organic and regenerative farmers who raise their animals entirely on diverse natural pasture. When we travel from the road from farm to city, you can trust that the food we bring home has been selected for flavor, for nutrition, for our natural environment, for the animals and for the farmers, for the soil below them and air above. In a world where choices are myriad but connections severed, we work as the link between your farmer and your plate in a transparent, ethical, convenient, and traditional way. Feeding your family while supporting these farms is what we do best. A tradition nearly as old as the city herself, our job as your local butcher is to be the one handshake between the farm and your table. So, Dougie, if you want to talk a little bit about, well, I'm sure you'll expound upon this more, but essentially we're using this to bring people in if they happen to be on the website with the Green Butcher, or maybe this is in a pamphlet. We want a story that not only compels them to read it in its entirety, but that, that creates a buy-in, that they can be moved by what Nick is trying to do at the Green Butcher and want to be a part of that. And then in terms of language, we can take these paragraphs and put them on Instagram. We can put them on posters. You can take sentences out of here and place them on visual items throughout, whether it's the store or your advertising. But this is kind of the central home from which the rest of the language and tone is taken.
Can I add to that, possibly?
Yes, please.
Okay. I think the thing that really jumps out about this brand narrative, and it's something that I try and incorporate in all of my work, is that there's very little mention of the product. This is a story that is seductive and draws you in and sells you the dream. We're not taught. So in my world, in the world of cheese, and a little bit in cider as well, because that's wonderful as well. There is always, traditionally in the cheese industry, here is this wonderful, creamy, delicious, pair this wonderful wine with it, and that's the end of the story. And actually, that's fine, but it doesn't really win hearts and minds. It doesn't really kind of lean in and grab you. And I think what's wonderful about that brand narrative is this: it takes you on a literal journey from farm to city, but at no point are we discussing the different cuts that are on the counter, or here's an amazing recipe for steak or whatever. So I think that's really important to remember when thinking about brand, and certainly in my work, and clearly in Saltwood's work as well, is that it is so much about the story behind the product that you don't sometimes even need to get to the product. It's really important to get that hearts and minds involved. You can only do that through good storytelling. Sorry, please carry on.
I can pick up there. Thanks, Sam. No, thank you. And like, if anyone else has questions about that, then message Charlotte and we can kind of go talk about it as we go. I think, yeah, what this does is, for me, like I'm realizing, well, whenever I work with Kate, I realize that I'm not the storyteller. All my work does is I try and tell this story via the logo, via the artwork. So if someone doesn't have the time to sit down and pick up a whole packaging, they kind of get the gist of it by what the artwork does. It's visual language, telling this story without the words. But this is sort of the short version. So it's gone through a filter again, and it's just that last packaging, which is feeding your family while supporting the organic regenerative farmers, is what we do best. So I'm going to show you the final work. And the point of this really isn't to be like, oh, wow, look, isn't that nice? It's to try and show how the story, which is something that you can really think about yourself. This is work that it takes a while. It's not the facts and figures, it's the heart and soul. It's the tone of voice, it's the feel of it. If you can start to see, or I can try and explain or justify the design decisions that I made to tell this story. So this is Nick's branding. And so we created this little bicycle, which is a GB as a logo mark that can travel from farm to the city. And Nick started on a bike, so it has some roots, and it's also the traditional butcher's bike. So we're trying to hit the tradition. We're trying to always be moving. This is a hard-working brand that's bringing you the best possible product, and it's also always only ever pasture fed. So it has this. It's using design language that can kind of say, look, this is you can believe this, you can trust this. This is a proper mark, but it's also approachable. You can ask questions. It's crossing the bridge. So the type mark moves like a bridge. So the bike's coming from farm to into Twickenham. And then you can see that rolling through all of our touch points. So we play on some traditional language, or like traditional, ways of showing butchers, but we're putting in, like, it's the pasture, we bring the farm all the way through. And then this is kind of the language evolving again, but organic and pasture fed, bringing the best. So you're always bringing. So even at sort of the quickest possible touch point, the story hopefully is coming across in all of the different ways people might come into contact with Nick and the work that they're doing. So this package goes and lives on a shelf in Planet Organic, and someone's lobbed it in there. We can still try and tell our story. So that language is still being used at every possible place when you interact with Nick and his brand. So I made this really professional slide that shows sort of Nick now, I guess a year and a little bit, maybe, after using the brand and seeing how it's kind of living. And I guess what I wanted to communicate, and what really helps me make decisions for like my tiny little farm business, that if you're telling the story of what you do, it's a really good decision maker on whether to do it or not. So we're going to put our effort into putting on an event. Does that event help tell our story? So we invited a load of customers from Twickenham down to Horton House to let's bring them to the farm. Perfect. That is, ready for it, on brand. It's had to happen at least once. But it's the same on the packaging and on socials. Like, are the social posts that, and I think Kate, if you could talk about this, because for those who don't know, Kate is one of the queens of farming social media. But when we're putting together a plan for the social media, it's okay, well, is it telling the story? Talking about the quality and how incredible the meat is, that's fine. That's absolutely fine to do, but tell it in the context of the story. Say it's just coming from the farm. We are working here. Remind people you're working direct. These are these are amazing farmers doing incredible stuff for soil, for health, for your family. We're bringing this directly to the table. There's no middleman. You can talk about your quality, but try and reframe it and keep the context of that narrative alive.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop sharing, unless anyone else wants to go back.
Dougie, if I could just add a couple of quick thing to the social media bit. As a livestock farmer myself, I found that photos of steaks you can only do so many of those before you lose interest with your audience. The product, to repeat what Sam said, is kind of, it's one part, but we're trying to bring people into the narrative, and social media is a wonderful tool for that. I use Instagram specifically. I think I might be getting too old for TikTok. Haven't figured out how to download it, but the Instagram has, for my farm, become really our go-to landing page. I most often will link my Instagram account over my website, because my Instagram account has our contact information, has the link to whatever latest thing I need people to be pushing towards, whether that's an event, whether that's a restaurant that's showcasing our meat. And I am able to bring in my audience with the story of my life here on the farm. That's been my kind of angle, is raising a family on a farm in Vermont in 2022. And it is, I think, being able to use social media to kind of keep your audience and your customers involved and caring for your story and rooting for your story can be super valuable in building up that loyalty to your brand.
Great. Thank you so much, Kate. Dougie, is there anything you want to add to that?
No.
Okay, great. Well, I think with that, maybe we'll move on to Sam. I don't know if Sam, if you want to.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So Doug, I spoke to Dougie the other day, and he said, please interrupt and kind of interact and all the rest of it. So what I did is I sat stoically and listened, because actually it's really interesting to hear a lot of things that I'm trying to kind of impart to the people I work with, articulated the way that you guys have just articulated. Kate, I think that your description of, the value of social media, and clearly you've cracked the code of social media because it works really well for you. But, it can work really well for people on a much smaller scale, as you say, as a landing page, almost like a shop window, if you like, to their life. And I encourage, it's an overused word, but the idea of authenticity, about telling those stories about how sometimes things are hard, sometimes things are challenging. It's not always beautiful sunrises and then you finish the day with the perfect steak. That gets pretty tired pretty quickly. I just wanted to show you a very short clip from a film, because that's my area really, is filmmaking, podcasting, which I think has value within the brand identity sphere. It's a much slower burn. I feel it has a kind of a natural kinship with farming, that kind of circle of the seasons and the slow developing of ideas and stories. And actually, I think podcasting is a really easy way for you guys to just to do that at home. In fact, it's not as technically challenging as you think it might be. You can use your phone to record, you can be out in the field. So I think podcasts have value. That's one part of what I do. A little bit of social media as well, mainly taking photographs and saying, no, we don't need to constantly be selling something. We just need to be putting things out there that tell your story. That's the tug and back and forth that I have with certain clients. But films really is sort of where I suppose I try and help people tell their story in the best possible way. And I just want to show you the opening little clip of a short film I made for Kingstone Dairy, which is a fantastic cheesemaker in Gloucestershire. They're on Manor Farm, which is an organic dairy farm just up the hill from Chedworth. So this is the opening to that film.
Quality, flavour, provenance. We're in the heart of the Cotswolds. The landscape is very special to me. Farms like Manor Farm contribute over decades and generations to carving that landscape. Cheese on this level, farmhouse, single herd cheese making, can offer us the opportunity to make something which expresses very honestly and quite perfectly where we're making it.
So I think it's very clear from that opening clip what David is all about. So it's about quality, it's about provenance, and it's also about a personal connection to that land. Now, he isn't a farmer, but he grew up in Gloucestershire, and actually it's an interesting business because it's on the farm. Generally, cheesemakers are split between farmhouse cheesemakers, where the farmer makes the cheese, and you could call artisan cheesemakers who buy their milk from somewhere else. In fact, David is somewhere between the two, and actually the milk that's produced on that farm, the herd is kept in a way that is designed to give quality milk for cheese making. So it's about as close as you can get. But I thought that the really important message that we wanted to get across was provenance, this idea of locality. And then as the film develops, you realize that there is an almost obsessive quest for quality as well. And so we are talking about the product because obviously it's a quality product. But really what we're talking about is David, the person at the center of this business who has this thirst for quality, who really loves and respects where he is, and who wants to tell the story of that place in his own way, which is by making wonderful cheese out of the milk produced on that land. So I think I'm kind of going to reiterate a little bit what Dougie and Kate were saying, because actually I think it's, first of all, it bears repeating, but I think I also just, there's huge value to this idea that brand is not the logo, brand is the story, brand is the narrative, brand is the things that make you who you are and your business what it is. And I would personally argue that the first thing in that conversation is you as an individual. Why do you do what you do? There are many different reasons why people do what they do, but working out what those reasons are, how do you get out, what gets you up in the morning, what gets you excited about what you do, what do you want to share with your audience? And then actually there's loads of different ways to tell that story. So you could go podcast, you could go film, you could use social media, you can create a more beautiful visual, using Dougie's art skills, for example, that perfectly tells your story, a perfectly written brand narrative from Kate. All of these are tools really at your disposal, but before any of that happens, you need to just sit down and probably just yourself or with your family or with your colleagues, just figure out what it is that makes you you. Don't worry about being special or unique, or don't worry about the competition. Just think about what makes you you. And I think that's a really valuable exercise that anybody can do. As Dougie said, it's very hard to do it for yourself. We actually had a conversation the other day about how we were still trying to figure that out, and it changes on a daily basis. But the actual exercise itself, the process, I think is a really valuable one to go through. Kate, you actually talked about social media. I'd like to get your take a little bit on it as well. What do you put your success down to? I'm interested. So I'm sort of a punter as well here at this point. I'd be really interested to understand what you put your success as the voice of farming in Vermont. How has that worked for you? Do you consciously approach it in quite an analytical way, or is it just about being honest and straightforward?
Thanks for the question, Sam. I don't want to take too much credit for having a bigger following. I think that can, like one time I was put into the BuzzFeed in Turkey, got a whole bunch of Turkish followers.
Wow.
So
that's a really important point, isn't it? Is value. What is the value of all those followers?
Exactly. I love hearing from my Turkish followers, but they're not going to the restaurants that I sell my meat to. So, maybe there isn't a monetary value. I think that I'm trying to do something twofold with my Instagram account, right? I'm trying to, because not every follower is going to go buy a steak from you. It's just unfortunately not how social media numbers work. But what I'm trying to do is is create, as I said, kind of a landing page. So we at my farm, we sell mostly direct to chefs. And I don't know how it works in England, but in America, with the whole farm to table movement, they want to put farms that people know and recognize on their menu. Kind of, you know, it becomes a whole weird status thing. And so I want to appeal to the chefs there. I want to be able to have a simple way for them to contact us. And I want them to be able to show their customers how the pigs were living before they ended up on a plate, or how the cows were living. So that is one of my requirements when I'm thinking about social media, is that very practical. But then the other one is it's a much more nuanced need, which is that how do I compel them to care about this? And I think, Sam, my success, to answer your question, my success, whatever that means, is that I have just tried to be as honest as I can with my followers. And I have found that the more honest I am about the difficulties here, the more response I get from them. And I don't tend towards the overly technical. I don't do a lot of the, how-tos, because most of the people that are going to eat my product don't really care for a how-to. I mean, I'm not trying to, my intended audience is not another farmer. That's been wonderful in terms of creating community with other farmers on Instagram, but the people I am writing for and posting for are often my hopeful clients. And I would say with a visual social media like Instagram, and I know there will be many people that would argue with me against this, but I think it's very important to get a pretty picture, and then you can say whatever you want. You can be as honest and dirty as you want in the text. But if you don't have a photo that's going to make them stop in their tracks when they're scrolling, then they're just going to keep on scrolling. And so I know nobody really loves that, but I see there's a question in the comments. Do I spend much time in direct communication on Instagram? I would say that I am, if anybody is asking about farming or the product or rural life, I will answer it. There's a lot of spammy things, and also there's a fair amount of harassment, but I will answer any honest and good faith questions through Instagram. So that's my little
Thank you.
I have a question for Dougie or Kate or Sam, whoever can speak to it really. And sorry to keep on the topic of social media. I know it's not the most interesting part of this whole conversation you've been having. But I guess, I don't know who is particularly active on various channels. Some people prefer Twitter. I know there's a very active farming community on Twitter versus Facebook versus Instagram. How do you decide what channel you emphasize? Is it your personal comfort, or is it your audience? Or I don't know if any of you are on different types or just prioritize one.
I mean, from my point of view, I think I encourage farmers generally towards Instagram and makers towards Instagram, because ultimately food is a visual medium as well as a flavor, and I mean, I live in East London, so I'm very envious of all of you people who live in places that aren't East London. And I get to look at those places on Instagram, and I get to, as a potential customer as well, imagine myself walking through those fields or being part of that team. And I think for me, that's why Instagram has such value. But I'd be interested to know what you guys think about the pros and cons of Twitter and Facebook, because that's something I'm still kind of toying with, really.
I will say just quickly, I would completely agree with Sam, because Instagram, you're trying to sell both your product and the rural lifestyle, for lack of a better word. And so, traditionally that is best done visually. I would say Twitter is so great for like the texting things, we're having a sale at the farm, all of those things, but there aren't as many people on Twitter as there are on the Meta platforms or on TikTok. So just a bigger audience on those, unfortunately. And then I would also just say to know your audience and community. I mean, as I said, I'm trying to sell to restaurants and people in the cities of New York and Boston. Instagram seems to be the best way to communicate to them. But if I were trying to sell to my local village here in Chelsea, Vermont, Facebook is the social media that everybody uses here. And so I could talk myself blue in the face on Instagram and nobody would see it. So I would be I would really encourage you to really think about who you're trying to talk to and reach and sell to and where they are. It does vary.
Can I ask a question to the group?
Please
If
do.
anybody's willing to talk about it. Does anyone have any particular experiences with social media that they've either found it really useful? I mean, I think the reason we've ended up talking about social media is it's accessible to everybody. You can just download it, create an account, and off you go. There's no sort of financial input. There's time, obviously, and you could bring someone in to do it for you. But has anybody used social media and found it to be useful or not useful? Or, are you put off by, Kate mentioned, things like the harassment farmers and food producers are leaving themselves open to it? What's this? Kate.
I
Kate's
suppose
asking a question.
I use Instagram, copied onto Facebook, and we have a small local following, I suppose. Interesting, I put a thing up last week that our pigs would love pumpkins, and if anyone had any pumpkins post Halloween. Well, we've been inundated, and we've had several families turn up with their kids to feed the pigs, and it's been a very positive experience for them and us, I think. And we had Waitrose turn up with 96 pumpkins.
Wow. Pumpkin fed pork.
Quite fun, really.
That's a lovely way to develop like an interaction, Polly. I think that's really interesting. And also with another commercial enterprise as well. It's not even just with your customers, but I think it's really interesting what Kate and Sam were saying as well about the sort of distance perspective on social media. I know a lot of the farms local to me, I follow them on Facebook, but for a more national or global perspective, I guess I see them on Instagram. So I guess it's just a trade-off.
I would say that, Polly, I love the story you just shared about the pumpkins, because that's the big goal, is getting somebody to the farm. I mean, that's the ultimate buy-in. Then they see that and they can, I mean, it depends. I have a low tolerance for for hosting on the farm because I'm a curmudgeon when you get right down to it. But if you like that, I mean, that's the best. So well done. Perfect use of social media.
Could I ask, for those who are averse to social media, who maybe sell direct from the farm gate or from their farm shop, if you could maybe speak to more of these like branding touch points that are not online based? That's for anyone to answer, including guests.
Well, I'd like to, I mean, I will share my experience in social media as well. Like, we get 100% of our inquiries through Instagram, which is just, it's a frightening position to be in. But that's the world. But like through non-social media, and it all kind of comes back to putting your story across. And I just wanted to hit that home again and again, because I really struggle, because it is for my business, it is like, if I could post, potentially I could get more business. This is really important to me. And it can get quite like, oh, is this right? Is this not right? Am I doing the right thing? So to just be able to answer that question simply to yourself, like, does this okay, I've sat down, I've really thought about it, I've tried and tested it. I know the story I'm trying to tell. I know that that'd be good for what I'm doing. Does this post, or does the way that I answer the phone, or does the experience that customer get when they come and pick something up from the farm, does that tell the story? And if it does, it's good. If it doesn't, think about it. And that's, I have to do it all the time for myself, because I'm like, well, I like it. It's like, well, it's not relevant. It doesn't communicate anything. It just communicates that you like it. It's tricky.
We've had William has said, I write a bi-monthly article in my local parish magazine, never talk about sales, just telling my stories. I think that's really interesting. And Kathy has also asked, I use Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. How important is TikTok and who does it reach?
I've tried TikTok a few times and then I just sort of stopped using it because I don't know, makes me feel like my soul's shriveling up a little bit. But I think Instagram is I don't know, cleaner somehow.
Yeah, I wish I could talk to TikTok. Sorry.
I
would say that one of the things I'm trying to balance personally is just how much time I spend on social media. Really don't like being there very much. So I find Instagram to be a bit easier in the like get in and get out for me.
Stephen Alexander says we get a majority of our beef sales through Facebook and Instagram. It's been fantastic for telling our story. And Richard says they use Instagram. It provides a fun platform where they cannot speak to sales. And it speaks to something Kate was saying, the challenge of followers over local market customers. Some do follow it and repost though. Also, yeah, I think that's a good point. If everyone does have social media, please post your links in the chat. You can see who's around. That'd be really interesting to see.
What I would say is,
sorry, Dougie.
Sorry, Sam. Go on. I was just going to say quickly, like, we're just talking about putting a narrative out there and, what that looks like. And it's great to hear people's experiences. This isn't like, maybe we should do, and I speak to Charlotte about like, there's obviously a lot of dark arts and wizardry that happens in targeted posts. And if you are going to put money behind sponsored posts, and there are lots of tools available to be able to actually target your local community, I just want to say that that's out there and that's a separate conversation. And it's something I just wanted to raise because, Instagram can be a tool, or any kind of meta platform. You can, it's frightening how specific you can get with your customers. I'm not an expert on it, but we work with these people for businesses, and, it's terrifyingly effective.
Can I also just add as well, we've talked a lot about social media, but actually the conversation started with effectively 3 creatives talking about branding, so Dougie is an artist and Kate is a writer, and I make, more sort of digital media. But the reality is if you do bring in a creative, let's say you've got your brand narrative, you feel comfortable with who you are, and you think, okay, so the best way to tell this story is by creating a beautiful visual identity with some wonderful logos and various things. I'm going to use Dougie, he's great. You can recycle those. You can talk to a creative about taking elements of Kate's narrative or sections of my film and kind of populating your social media. So you don't have to worry about necessarily, being the person who creates all the content. You can take that content. So David, for example, that film I've made him, he's taken stills from it. He's cut little reels to get, he's done all sorts of different things to populate his Instagram and to make it look really kind of shiny and beautiful, and to constantly be telling that story. So I think when you do if you speak to a creative about making things for you, also you can consider the longevity of that content that they're making, and actually that if you're canny with it, you can recycle over and over again. I'm guessing Dougie and Kate, you see that with your clients? Nodding.
Yes. Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, completely. It's just like you sort of touched on it there. Like if you can spend the time and you can put together a narrative that, literally feels like home. And I kind of gone blank on what's happened in the last hour, but what's really cool about farms and why I love work, and I won't get bored of working for farms, is, everyone in this call could be an organic dairy farmer, for example, but none of the farms will be the same. Every field here is different. We're all doing it for different reasons. We all love different breeds. We all have relationships with our livestock. We all, have relationships with our place. We all have different biodiversity. We're all passionate about different things. And even though, say, all of our product was PFL certified, and it's all going to be different. And that's exciting. And if that's the reason you're into it, that's the reason your customers are going to be into it. And so it's so crucial to try and, figure that out. And it's something that I know we were saying it's really hard to have a sort of an introspective, like, who am I? But actually it is about you, but it's also about your place. And what helped me here at Saltwood is Saltwood is the woods that surround me. I'm on an incredible piece of history, 400 yards from the ocean. I want to tell that story. I want to tell the story about my farm and the vegetables that I grow here. People have been growing here since the Iron Age. It's amazing. And that's it thrills me to be able to do what I do here. So it is about you, but it's also about your relationship with your farm. And I feel like that's the story that, you never get bored telling it, because it's different for everyone. Yeah.
I think Kate might have something to say, but could I just bring in, Sophie asked a question a few minutes ago saying, when creating a brand, is the story of the overall farm more important than the individual aspects on the farm, if that makes sense? Sophie, I don't know if Sophie, if you want to elaborate, or if everyone's happy to take that away.
I'll just jump in quickly to kind of explain what I mean.
Sure.
So we've just basically bought a farm and going to create a regen farm on it, with specializing in rare breeds. So it's kind of what I was trying to say is, do we concentrate on the overall brand of the farm, like the actual farm itself, or would you say to concentrate on the cattle or the dairy side of it, or the crop side? Like, what way would it be an overall picture, or would you try and look at the little bits involved?
Well, Sophie, this is Kate speaking. And I think I'm taking your question to be the general, how does this fit into a brand? Or are you specifically asking about a visual or narrative?
No, just generally, because it's so brand new, we haven't launched anything. I'm in the process of doing that now. But talking about the social stuff, it's to create the marketing plans and where I go with it. Is it to tell the overall story like you spoke about in the beginning, or to focus on bits that you think people might be more interested in than others? Or
but sorry, Kate.
Oh no, I saw in the chat, Kathy writes, share your passion, and I would completely agree. And I think whatever part of this story is the one that drives you the most, that is what other people will be, will gravitate towards. What you are passionate about is what I wanted to say.
I agree, first of all. But also I think it's worth saying that actually they don't have to be, you're not choosing one or the other. The brand narrative, that idea of what you are and what, why are you taking on this farm? Why are you doing that? Are you forced to do it, or are you doing it out of choice, out of passion? That's your kind of overarching brand narrative. But actually you've got all these diverse different things that you can focus on, and gosh, you're never going to be at a loss about what to talk about, because there's always something happening on the farm. The seasons are constantly changing, the land's changing, the different elements of your farm are different, but they are all united by this passion and drive that you have to start this business, to start this farm. And I think that's your story, isn't it? Is that journey that you're about to go on. And I think now is the time to start telling that story, because people love a journey. They love the highs and the lows and the ups and the downs and all the rest of it. So I think, well, it's all of it, isn't it, really, Kate, Dougie, I suppose. I don't know how helpful that is, but it is kind of all of it.
I would
using social media or podcasts or whatever the medium is to get into those specific, whether you're showcasing a breed or something. And then I could talk your ear off about Instagram, and I won't, because it's kind of a boring topic, but on Instagram, using the story function, or whether that's through Facebook, you can do those daily things that you might not want to see living on your landing page, but those smaller aspects.
I would, Sophie, I would, what helps me, because like we've been here like 3 years now, and when you're getting going, there's a lot, I mean, it just feels like a lot, anyway, and you're trying to, like, you know, take time and, you know, treat the lamb well. So I just remind yourself sort of like, why are you telling this story? And that's the story that you need to tell. It's, you can kind of get too detailed, and you know, I'm doing no dig, and it's, you know, it's really important. So, well, let's look at, if you're going to spend business time and it's a farming business, and even though it, you know, that those lines get really blurred when you live at work, but if you're going to spend time at work, then it needs to pay. So just focus, like, why are you telling this story? How is it going to help your business? And then maybe that can help filter out and keep it sort of, you know, on focus, and help you feel what the main narrative is within that. Because I don't know, where I was when we started the farm is very different to where we are now, in terms of, you know, what works and what doesn't work.
That's really interesting. Thank you for those thoughtful responses, you three. Does anyone else have any questions, comments? And also thank you so much for sharing all of your social media handles. It's fantastic to see.
I've been following away while listening to the others speak. I'm kind of intrigued. Yeah,
everyone should have at least 24 new followers by the end of this season. That'd be good. Well, we have 2 minutes left, so if anyone does have any questions, or I don't know if any of our speakers had anything from their earlier talks they'd like to go back to or expound on, or anything they'd particularly like to convey. I'm quite interested in generally, because I think this is sort of what you've been speaking about a lot, is how do you decide on your narrative and taking the time to figure out, yeah, what is your unique selling point? Is that the same thing, or is that different? Is that part of your narrative?
I think it's part, isn't it? Really, it's not you know, the critical element to it. I think it's really hard. It's a really, me and Doug, we had a very long conversation that probably could have gone on longer if we hadn't had to go our separate ways. But it's a difficult exercise. Don't we say it's very easy for us to say, sit down and work out your brand narrative, or your, you know, the center of what you are, but actually it's a hard thing to do, and it does require a level of introspection. But when I speak to clients, I think that the starting point for me is what gets you out of bed in the morning. You know, what drives you, what are you passionate about? And when you start to kind of think in that way, then it starts to kind of unfold a little bit.
Great. Kate or Dougie, do either of you have any last points you'd like to get across, or does anyone have any questions?
Well, I would just like to say that, to kind of jump on what Sam said, I think that as I understand it, most of you are pasture-based farmers. Am I correct in that? And so, you know, the great majority of your customers don't get to live the life that you are living in that rural setting. They might not want to at all, Sam being one of them. They might not want to at all, but they still can be intrigued by it and fall in love with your story based on what you're sharing. And so, you know, and that has been, as I said earlier, so greenwashed that bringing back some reality and just putting yourself in the story, I think is just really valuable. And that personal connection is something that your customers will be drawn to.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't talk about greenwashing, so I guess, you know, we may as well cover that in like 20 seconds. But yeah, you know, saying buzzwords, regenerative, organic, all, you know, grass-fed, the thing about these words is they mean something to some people, but they also mean nothing when everyone uses them. And so, you know, what again I say, like, what's so cool about farming is it's so individual, but it's just, you know, no two farms are the same. So yes, you're all those things, but you're also completely different to, you know, Tesco's that are also all those things, you know. So that's that.
Great. Okay, well, we've made it to 8 o'clock. So I just want to thank the three of you again. That was really fascinating. And thank you so much for building off of each other's points and everything like that. It was really interesting to see. And thank you so much to all of our attendees for joining and for your questions and for sharing your social media handles. I still think that's great. If you do have any other questions, please do email me. I'm Charlotte at Pasture for Life. I'll put that in there and I can always pass things along. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to have you all. And you'll be receiving a recording link of this shortly. I can't tell you when exactly. Let's look out for that. And also keep an eye out for the rest of the webinar schedule happening over the winter. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye.